Hi, Debbie. How are you?
I am so excited to get to talk to you again about this film.
Yeah,
And
excited.
this is, you know, what I love about your filmmaking is I saw growth in you as a filmmaker from little accidents to kindergarten teacher.
Hmm.
Now I see huge growth in your storytelling with worth. Wow.
Thank
This
you. Thank
this
you.
this is a powerhouse film, Sarah. A real powerhouse film. And you have done a remarkable job bringing this story to life with such vivid emotion, but done with such restraint. And I spent 27 years, as Karina can tell you, I spent over 27
Hmm.
years in law. And I'd read Ken's book, and I'd been
Hmm.
involved in class actions and settlements and a lot of wrongful death. And that was always the big question: the worth of a human life.
Hmm.
And it's something people don't stop and think about, but you really present it so beautifully here. It's, do you look at a formula and everybody gets the same, where you've got multiple parties, or do you look at the individual? What is their contribution? What is their worth to more? Is the junkie on the street, is their value more or less than a CEO? And you really present it and you make people think. And this aspect of 9/11 is something that people either didn't know about, didn't understand, didn't want to know about. And I think they really started to clue in a little bit with Jon Stewart and all his battling with
Hmm.
Congress for the first
Yeah.
responders to reopen the victim compensation fund, or extend it for them for the cancer and all the injuries that were
Yeah.
manifesting after the fact. But you bring this front and center, Sarah, and do it so well. You
Oh, thanks.
blew me away.
Oh, thanks.
Where do you even start with a film like this? Because you have a lot happening with performance. You have
Hmm.
even more happening. Oh, you and your visual metaphor. You knock it out of the park here.
Hmm.
You do a beautiful job with the visual metaphor, with horizontal and vertical blinds, vertical
Hmm.
blind, the buildings, horizontal and vertical windows. You
Hmm.
and the opening, and how you and your cinematographer Pepe, how you slowly open as we get more into the film, and Ken and his eyes
Yeah.
start opening. We see
Hmm.
the Venetian blinds start opening a little more and a
Yeah.
little more, and light coming in, and I love that.
See,
So
not everyone realizes these things. That's great that you noticed that. Yeah, I think for me, what really attracted me to the film was this idea, was the sort of moral conundrum of it. How math and calculation of dollars and cents and this kind of rational actuarial model, how that collides with the world of raw emotion and 9/11 and the heartbreak of families. So I think, both Pepe and I thought a lot about that. How do we box our characters in the beginning? How do we show Ken as a little closed-minded, less pliable? And then how do we sort of open him up? And, we even really loosen up with the camera towards the end of the movie. We have a lot more handheld. And we get a lot more human. I mean, the color tones shift a little bit and become more saturated and more rich. So, yeah, that's great that you noticed that. But I mean, I think that's the crux of the film, right? Is how do you, what's the, there's so much tension inherent in the scenario that there's a sort of matter-of-factness of calculating numbers, and how does that just sort of crash with the heartbreak of countless personal tragedies, and how do we move from a sort of cynicism to open-heartedness and a rigidity to, I guess, pliability would be the word.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you really give us that great food for thought without shoving it down people's throats either. That's really important. And you never do that. But I love the way you show us, and it's through the moments of quiet. This is not a really dialogue-heavy film. You have clear blocks of time and space that is just reflective, where you have Camille just sitting in her office alone and thinking, where you have Priya just walking and thinking, and then a lot for Ken. He's totally closed off from the world with his very orderly, neat collection of CDs and albums, and plugs into his headphones and tunes out the whole world. Was so tuned out on the train that he didn't even realize 9/11 was happening.
Right.
And you really use that to great advantage, forcing us to look and to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of plot and exposition to get out, because I think, how the fund works is complicated. So there was a lot of work in just communicating some of those technicalities to the audience. But then I think some of the stronger and most emotional moments are when the characters are alone and you're feeling not just the pain of the claimants, but the pain of a team of people that in a way have to absorb all of this anger and frustration. And, as you know, if you've seen it, gratitude too. I mean, people brought in sort of bronze baby shoes and shoe boxes of photos and mementos and letters and last voicemail messages. So I was kind of interested in, I guess, the psychological toll of that on their end, and what that was like over the course of, 2 years that they had to put this fund together.
Well, and what you really show us with that, and you do that so beautifully in Ken's office, where it has gone from this, very prim and proper and everything, a place for everything in its place, to now you have this collection of humanity there. And that's something that I think you don't let us forget, the human connection. You show us the humanity plays out with all of those objects, with all of those mementos, and reminds us of people and individuals, and taking it beyond dollar signs.
Yeah, I mean, Ken Feinberg himself, we became friendly, and he was just so gracious in helping us with the film and giving us, information, and when we were kind of doing research and creating his offices and creating the world. And, he said, of course there were these interviews where money was talked about. He said, but in the majority of them, people just wanted to vent and talk about their loved ones. And I thought that was so interesting,
And
that was a surprising fact. It wasn't really just business. There was a lot of sharing.
Yeah, and anytime you have a disaster and something of this magnitude, and the fact that, and I'm so glad that you got it in there, is that Ken and his firm did all of this pro bono.
Yeah.
Because everybody thinks lawyers are bloodsuckers.
Yeah, no, I know, it's true. Yeah, I mean, he's a really decent guy, and I think, I try not to lionize him or put him on a pedestal, and I try to leave open to, I let the audience decide whether these funds are a good thing or a bad thing, but I do think that there's a great decency to both him and Camille, and the fact that they put a sort of floor and ceiling on the payouts, I think was, for me, very admirable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I completely agree. You have to set some kind of parameter. You have to.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, otherwise it's a free for all, and it becomes a
Yeah.
cash grab.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I truly, totally respected what he and Camille did all through the entire process, and to see it shown so succinctly here. Again, you do an amazing job with that, Sarah. I'm curious. Did you feel any greater sense of responsibility in making this film than you have with your prior films, because it is 9/11, because these are real people. Ken and Camille, real people. Charles Wolfe, a real person. Now, Tate's character of Lee Quinn, of course, he's an amalgamation
Yeah.
of several bloodsuckers. But but
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think, when the film was pitched to me, just in one sentence, to be perfectly honest, I kind of shirked, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to delve into such a heavy subject matter. And then I read the script, which I think was really beautifully written by Max Borenstein, and I thought, that it was so riveting and compelling, and it was really an angle on 9/11 that I hadn't heard of before. I kind of knew who Ken Feinberg was, but I didn't really know the details of the fund. But yeah, I mean, there's a huge responsibility, in getting it right when these people really exist. And I wanted to respect the facts, and I certainly didn't want to Hollywoodize the work of Ken and Camille, and I didn't want to fetishize the pain of 9/11 or the pain of the claimants. So I think that was a major, it was something I really had to think about before taking the project on, and it was something that, I spoke about to all of my creative collaborators, whether it was costumes, anything, production design, the person helping me with the news footage on TV, all of this stuff, I did want to use a certain degree of restraint, and I didn't want to sort of create tragedy porn, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that brings up a very interesting aspect of this film, the actual news footage from that day, from 9/11, working with your researchers to pull the appropriate footage, and working with your editor, with Julia Block, to be very judicious in the use of that footage, but then going a step further, working with Julia with the editing of this whole film. How long do you hold silence? How
Yeah.
long, how much time do you give victims to stand up and yell and vent? That had to be a very difficult process for you.
Yeah, I mean, and Julia's so fantastic. I mean, she just is so emotionally astute, and I think we have a similar kind of stylistic, I don't know, we kind of have the same tendencies, and we like similar things. So I think there were moments when we love the solitude of characters, we love the silences, because it can get talky at moments.
Mm-hmm.
We can get in the weeds at moments, but then it was really important to us to show Ken's loneliness. I mean, I think he feels really alone in this at moments, and he isolates himself. So that was really important for us to capture on screen. It's also a piece about so many different characters, and I think Julia did a beautiful job kind of interweaving these storylines, whether it's, Priya, who's the associate, the young associate, and, she's kind of going through her own sense of anxiety, or it's Camille, who is, of course, a very public face for the fund, and has to kind of keep her emotions inside, and she has to kind of create this suit of armor for herself in these interviews. We really tried to touch on everyone's involvement.
You really did, and you did it so beautifully. And I love that you mentioned about Ken's loneliness, because we see that even when he's in his own house, when the family is sitting there and they're playing Trivial Pursuit, and he's totally tuned out.
Yeah.
He has no clue, And this is where Michael Keaton shines in with his roles and his performance, because the way that just watching him here, the way he hangs his head, the deeper he gets into this, he doesn't want anybody to see him. He doesn't want anybody to talk to him. And then when he starts connecting, but then while he's lost, his head hangs, his shoulders slump. It's real. The body language is incredible.
Yeah.
How fortunate were you to not only have Michael, but to have Amy, to have Stanley, to have Tate. This cast is amazing and so perfect in these roles.
Well, I was hugely fortunate. I think, with the four of them, certainly, you just, in a way, you stay out of their way and you let them do their work. There wasn't, they were so well prepared. They were so engaged emotionally in the material, and so it made the process really fulfilling for me as a director. But Michael is incredible. I mean, exactly what you said. I mean, his body language is pretty great, and I realized it on set the first day. I was just watching him, and he just has a charisma. The way he moves his body is kind of incredible. And whether he's teaching a class as he does, and at the beginning of the film, or later when he's kind of slumped over boxes going through files, he's sort of a natural like that. But Amy, I also I loved working with her, and she really is so restrained in it that for me at least, and I hope for audiences, it makes her, these moments when she does emote towards the end of the film that much more powerful, I think. But she is fantastic, and she was really a joy to work with, as was Stanley, of course.
What did you, as a storyteller, as a filmmaker, what did you learn about yourself in making Worth? Because this goes so much further than the emotional resonance in the stories you've told before. And because it is based on on truth and history, I'm curious what you learned about yourself as a storyteller.
That's a good question. I think what to me was kind of the most surprising and moving element for me as a filmmaker in this was that, certainly I had my eye on the prize of making a film and being finished with it and doing a good job with the final product. But I think the process of it was so joyful and fulfilling. I can't say joyful necessarily, but it was lovely in that, first responders came and auditioned, and just in the auditioning process, for instance, people really talked about their experiences with 9/11. And so I think the film itself, the process of making it, was something really therapeutic, both for me and for kind of everyone involved. So, extras and, movie stars, we all kind of talked about it on set. And I think everyone's collective experience was kind of bubbling under the surface of it all. Even if their stories aren't literally in the film, it's like all of our stories are somehow in it, and I think that that's kind of neat.
An amazing job, Sarah. An amazing
Thanks
job
so much, Debbie.
with Worth.
Appreciate it.
I will be watching it again because it speaks so loudly. And I can't wait for your next film.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Sarah.
Nice talking to you again.
Good talking to you, too. So until next time, you have a great weekend, holiday weekend, no less.
Yeah.